Now, from Atlanta News First, the issues that matter to you. This is On the Record.
Georgia is obviously a very important state to the president and to the Republican Party, and the president loves the people of Georgia.
The 47th President of the United States is visiting Northwest Georgia's 14th Congressional District, which just so happens to be the site of the most watched special congressional election so far this year. And that is one of the headlines we are following in this week's On the Record podcast here at Atlanta News First. I'm Tim Darnell, joined by Abby Kasuris, her first time on this midweek podcast, so we're very happy to have her on board. Abby, you and I have been following the special congressional election in Northwest Georgia's 14th District really since Marjorie Taylor Greene shook the nation's political establishment late last year when she announced that she was not going to seek re-election and that she was actually resigning the seat. At one time, she was President Donald Trump's most ardent, staunch defender on Capitol Hill, and yet over the course of just a few weeks, their relationship really dissolved in a very public, very bitter dispute that led the now former Georgia Congresswoman to announce she was resigning. And now we have, initially there were 22 candidates who had qualified for the race. Now we're down to 18. The field is narrowing as we get closer to the March 10th special election, and yet the president visiting this district in Rome and making remarks about really touting his economic policy. We have to wonder if the candidate that he has endorsed in this race, the District Attorney for the Lookout Mountain Judicial Circuit, Clay Fuller, if he will be following the president's trip as he makes his way to Georgia.
Yeah, I know. With 18 candidates, you're essentially guaranteed a runoff. And so the two that I'm hearing are the two Republicans to watch, Colton Moore and Clay Fuller. It's looking like it's going to end up between the two of them. But I went out on Monday for the start of early voting to the 14th district and started talking with some of the voters who were essentially planning on coming back out for that runoff. But 18 candidates, and they're all, what I find interesting, Georgia Public Broadcasting had their debate series that aired Monday and Tuesday. We ran that here on ANF as well. And what I thought was interesting is how a lot of the candidates in that forum wanted to separate themselves from Marjorie Taylor Greene. And she was really well loved in the district. And is she currently, and are we starting to see that when it comes to some of the candidates? I think that's something to watch closely.
Now let's break down the number of candidates in this race so far. When qualifying was held in January, we had 22 candidates. Republicans, Democrats, an independent, and a libertarian candidate all come down to the state capitol. Secretary of State's office and put down the several $1,000s qualifying fee. And yet really within the early part of the following week, we began seeing the first candidate drop out, Christian Hurd. He endorsed Clay Fuller. He was then followed by one other candidate who has also endorsed Clay Fuller. We've had one candidate drop out and endorse State Senator Colton Moore. One other candidate dropped out earlier this week and has not made an endorsement. So now we're looking at 13 Republicans, 3 Democrats, 1 independent, and 1 libertarian. Still, it's a very heavily Republican field, and yet you get the sense, and we've seen some stories that perhaps Democrats are hoping that with so many candidates, they can maybe split the field and wind up in that first or second slot, leading to a very interesting runoff on April 7th.
We've seen a lot of the Democrats in that forum talking about affordability, talking about some of the agriculture issues that are really important for farmers. in that area. And I think what's interesting about former Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene's district is it is very diverse. And actually, when I went out and started talking to voters on Monday, some of them were voting for a change, were voting for the Democrats on the ticket. And so I think it's interesting to see what will happen and what voters will decide. And I think it's almost, in a way, a litmus test to figure out what's going on in that district and what we could see in November with the election there.
Do you get the sense that we're going to see more candidates drop out? We've had a couple of 14th District Republican candidate forums. One was canceled because of the recent ice storm and winter weather. So I believe there were initially planned 3 candidate forums and 3 straw polls that obviously Republican leaders in the 14th District were hoping would narrow the field down. We've now had 1, perhaps 2 by now. You get the sense that Republican leaders are really hoping to narrow the field and winnow out, I should say, the serious contenders from the less serious ones.
Well, now we've started to get to the point where we've had these forums, people are hearing more about these candidates, and these candidates have to decide, am I going to continue to try to keep raising money and taking time to visit with voters who might be undecided, or do I throw my weight behind another candidate? And as well, I mean, when we talk about a guaranteed runoff, do they want that? Runoffs are expensive as well. So I think now is a time where this week or even next week, we could start to see some of those candidates drop out if they really don't feel like they can keep going for the rest of this race.
Let's look at the electoral calendar because we're asking the Northwest Georgia 14th District voters to be heading to the polls quite a lot between now and the end of the year. We have a March 10th special election, an almost certain guaranteed runoff on April 7th. Then you have the May 20th general election, the primary, I should say, more than likely a runoff in June. Then we have the November 3rd general election. So, these runoffs and these elections are expensive, and you have to wonder what kind of adequate representation the voters in this district will have the privilege or the constitutional right of having on Capitol Hill when you have so many candidates who are continually asking people to head back to the polls. They're in a continual campaign 100% of the time mode. How much time will they have to devote to very vital and needed constituent services?
You have to be in election mode pretty much the whole time because you are trying to get voters on your side, and are you able to really dedicate that time to making the change you want? I think you're right when you say that too, Tim, is this is back to back to back. So candidates really have to decide, am I ready to really dedicate the next several months, really through the end of this year, to being in campaign mode, because it is exhausting when you are trying to go to a lot of events, raising a lot of money, and you're not able to actually really get in there and do the work as much as you'd want to be able to do.
Now, obviously, the 14th District had a very high-profile congressional representative in Marjorie Taylor Greene. I want to take you back to something you mentioned earlier when you were looking at the candidate forum and you've been out in the district talking with people. Do you get the sense that they really just want decent, adequate constituent services? Marjorie Taylor Greene, despite her past controversies, her office had very high marks in delivering responsive, timely constituent services to the voters in that district. What are voters up there looking for in their next representative on Capitol Hill?
She was very responsive, and I think that they still want that as well. And I think we saw a lot of that messaging in the forum, is that we want to be there for you. This is what we are going to put as a priority. And it seemed like across the board amongst those 18 candidates, there were a lot of things that were discussed. When it comes to constituent services, veteran affairs was one I heard a lot, as well as affordability and making sure to bring down the cost for people in the 14th district. So, and bringing jobs, I think that's also something that we heard a lot of messaging around. It's hard to separate some of those candidates because it really does feel like a lot of them have the same types of messaging that they are really trying to get across in this race.
Now, President Trump has endorsed Clay Fuller, who is the district attorney for the Lookout Mountain Judicial Circuit. And I wanted to mention some comments that the president made recently on Wednesday. He delivered some remarks at the White House in which he floated the idea of sending National Guard troops to the city of Atlanta. And I'll read his comments. Go to 2020, look at the facts that are coming out, rigged, crooked elections. Take a look at Detroit. Take a look at Pennsylvania. Take a look at Philadelphia. Take a look at Atlanta. Horrible corruptions on elections, and the federal government should not allow that. The federal government should get involved. These remarks are made as he is visiting Georgia in the Northwest Georgia 14th District, and these remarks come after the January 28th FBI execution of a search warrant at the Fulton County Elections Hub and Election Central, where they seized several hundred boxes of ballots and tabulator tapes, all related to the 2020 general presidential election, an election that saw Democrat Joe Biden become the first Democrat since 1992 to carry Georgia or any other deep southern state in a presidential election. What do you make of these remarks from the president that he was kind of overtly saying that he might be entertaining the idea of sending federal troops to Atlanta in a state that is going to have arguably one of the most watched gubernatorial elections this year?
I wouldn't say that it's surprising. I mean, this is something that he has talked about a lot, and we're also starting to see a lot of that sentiment amongst some of our state legislatures or state legislators as well. We have the State Board of Elections meeting, that the first one since that FBI raid, that's really has been going on this week. We expected they would talk about that FBI raid, and they're still expected to, but that meeting got extremely long. I think if you talk to a lot of those board members on the state election board, that they have expressed sentiment that they have the power and they could put a temporary superintendent in place in Fulton County if they feel that Fulton County's Board of Elections is not able to adequately run their elections. And we have state lawmakers who are pushing for that to happen. We have bills at the state legislature right now that would are related to the Fulton County elections. And so it's not surprising. And as much as we hear that from Washington, from the federal government, I also see that here at the state level, at the state legislature.
All of this is also continuing to happen in the trial of Colin Gray. Colin Gray's son, Colt Gray, is accused in the September 4th, 2024 shooting at Appalachia High School here in Metro Atlanta in Barrow County, part of the Metropolitan Atlanta Statistical Area, our MSA, a horrible incident that you covered as well as all of us did here at Atlanta News First, a shooting that left 4 people dead, 9 others injured. Colin Gray, Colt Gray, we should say, is accused in that incident, but his trial date has not yet been set, as he is continuing to, from what we understand, undergo medical or psychological evaluations ahead of a possible trial or plea deal, or however that case turns out. But his father, Colin Gray, that trial began and is underway, currently undergoing. We heard opening statements and now multiple witness testimonies. He is accused of allegedly allowing his son access to an AR-style semi-automatic rifle that was used allegedly in that shooting. You spend a lot of time at the state capitol. You do such an amazing job covering the legislative activities here in Atlanta. School safety obviously has been a topic not only last year in the immediate aftermath of that incident, but there are several school safety bills now being proposed by legislators. Take us through what's going on at the state capitol as far as this issue goes.
Last year, I feel like in the wake of that shooting, you had a big push, a bipartisan push to create change from the Republican side. They really wanted to focus on mental health and what they could do, allowing for those school safety grants that the governor has proposed extending to this next year as well, about $50,000 per school for whatever school safety measures they thought were important. So for a lot of the schools we spoke with, SROs, school resource officers, hiring an extra one of those, the Centegix system that Judd Smith, the sheriff in Barrow County, really credited for helping with their response and their quick response after that shooting. So there were a lot of different measures that schools were able to choose from. And now this year, we've started to see a Republican-backed measure to require that all schools put metal detectors at entrances. And actually getting to check in with some of those schools, we headed to Midtown High School here in Atlanta that has one of those systems. So we actually got to watch as students walked through in the morning. I will say, getting to talk with the police chief for APS, he said it greatly has helped them in bringing the number of weapons that have been found in the schools down from about 17 before the systems to about 7. But when you hear 7, I think there's still a conversation of, well, those weapons are still able to get through. And getting to talk with Chief Applin, he said, if people want to do something, they can still find a way. So you have that metal detector bill. Then you also have something that we got to watch last week, a drone system. Essentially, there is a program based out of Texas that would put these drones inside of schools. And you have drone operators who are extremely highly skilled. They would then deploy those drones, and they could essentially within 5 seconds get to a shooter, within 15 seconds, have them on the ground, within a minute, hopefully fully apprehended. And so you have a lot of conversation around, do we add more equipment and security? Do we add more manpower? And what this looks like. I will say that the pushback from a lot of the Democrats has been these requirements and also the funding. Do we have that here? And if we require all schools in our state, you have to think about what schools maybe in Cobb County would look like, where they have multiple different entrances. These might not have been originally built as school buildings, so they might have multiple entrances, and the cost that it would cost for them versus maybe somewhere more in rural Georgia, like maybe Effingham County outside of Savannah, if they truly need that requirement, and if they are required to pull from that school safety fund to get those metal detectors, what they might be giving up if maybe last year they hired an SRO. If they wouldn't be able to have that. So I think there's a big conversation is really driven by parents, because at the state capitol at any given time, there are different parent groups that are lobbying for something because they do not feel safe sending their kids to school. I had one woman tell me, my child, my 5-year-old, is safer in this building, walking through the metal detector and with all the security present, than actually sending that child to school. And that's why she took him to the state capitol that day. And I think when you hear that, it really kind of sends that chill down your spine of,
Right.
there is something that needs to be done to offer parents that security.
You mentioned school resource officers, also known as SROs, in watching and covering the testimony of the trial of Colin Gray. We've heard testimony from the school resource officers who were actively engaged in searching for a student who was suspected of carrying a fairly large weapon in his backpack when the shooting actually began. So you can make the argument that school resource officers might be really your first Those are your true first responders, as opposed to metal detectors and drones and other technological advancements. Are you hearing any advocates for additional funding to hire more SROs?
I think that just humans on humans want to see other humans, as well involved in that. And so there's this push pull. We have so much technology now, but also what would make people feel safer. Some parents say it would be those school resource officers being present. And so there is only so much money that can go to each school. And when we do pass legislation that would be statewide, it doesn't exactly give those schools that type of autonomy like the school resource grants would, that $50,000 towards some type of school security measure, like in this previous session.
Well, Georgia continues to be the most dynamic state in the nation for political developments. We'll continue to follow these and other developments here on Atlanta News First and AtlantaNewsFirst.com. A reminder to watch On the Record with Atlanta News First every Sunday morning at 11 a.m. on Atlanta News First. You can also watch that show on AtlantaNewsFirst.com. A reminder, you can also listen to all of the Atlanta News First podcasts, including this one, On the Record, wherever you get your podcast, as well as on YouTube and all of our streaming channels. Thanks for watching and listening to this edition of On the Record with Atlanta News First. For Abby Kasuris, I'm Tim Darnell.
Thank you for watching ANF Plus. For more breaking news, live coverage, and your community stories, download the Atlanta News First app. You can also watch us on YouTube, Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV. To join the conversation on YouTube Live, visit our channel and hit subscribe. You can also listen to the Atlanta News First podcast by searching Atlanta News First on your preferred listening platform.